So we have created a system for authorship attribution. That means the ability to use text that we know who the writers of those texts are, and we can use that knowledge to classify texts that we don't know who the author is.
If you imagine a block of text and you have all the words in the text and you gray out all the nouns, all the adjectives, all the verbs, all the what we call content words, and what you're left with is essentially a chain of smaller words like prepositions and adverbs. We generate networks where each node in the network will be a different function word. The edge in between two function words will be how many times in a particular text they appear one after another. We can take a text, any particular text, and build this word adjacency network for a text. And we do this for any text, and for a particular author, say we have a set of texts that we know were written by this author, we combine all those networks into one combined network, and we call that the author profile.
Word adjacencies, they are capturing how often you use one word in the context of another. That is, how often you use two words that are next to each other. That means that it is a proxy for your grammar style, or it's related to the way in which you use English grammar. And we have found out that different authors have wildly different ways of utilizing English grammar, and that wildly different way of utilizing grammar manifests on wildly different word adjacency networks.
We wanted to see if we could use this to actually answer a problem that people want an answer to. And one of the more famous cases of this is the case of William Shakespeare, and whether or not he didn't write some of his plays or had help writing some of his plays. So Christopher Marlowe was a writer and only wrote about 7 or 8 plays, but it's often been considered as a likely candidate for some of Shakespeare's earlier plays because they were written around the same time. We looked at this by constructing a profile for Marlowe and constructing a profile for Shakespeare and comparing some of the more questionable plays in Shakespeare's early career, such as the 3 parts of Henry VI. When we're comparing the 3 parts of Henry VI to the Marlowe profile, they're much, much closer than, say, comparing the Marlowe profile to some of Shakespeare's later plays, where we know that Marlowe was not a candidate of these plays. And by seeing that typically a Marlowe profile would be so far away from a Shakespeare play, and then to see it so close to a Shakespeare play, even closer than Shakespeare in many cases, suggests a lot that Marlowe might have had a hand in this.
Having this knowledge will change how people learn about Shakespeare, because we, as a species, let's say, are changing our perception of how Shakespeare himself worked. And what we have discovered is that the environment in his time was much more collaborative than we thought it was. There is by now evidence that about a third of the plays that Shakespeare wrote contain pieces that were not written by him. And now that we have added Marlowe as a collaborator, we keep enlarging the number of people with whom Shakespeare collaborated, and that will help us understand better his creative writing process. We know now that Marlowe played an important role on Shakespeare becoming Shakespeare. I think that's something very important.